We're going to give them a warm welcome. Please have a seat by the fireside here, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. So, imise idinka mid aha af Soomaaliga si fiican u taqaan gacantaag.
Af Soomaali.
Okay, put your hands up. How many of you cannot understand Somali? Raise your hands. Okay, some of you can understand. So inshallah we'll tell you some stories, and some of those stories we'll try to tell you in Somali and then tell you in English. Inshallah. Good idea, right? Inshallah. So you all know that part of the Somali culture is storytelling, right? وأما قشين سوما كل شاكة حريرة واتقنا سوما. So to start the story, that's what we say. شاكة حريرة. وأول تقنا سوما. شبر بعد دور شيء. ما هو شبر بعد دور شيء شاه بيكرس. يا وحي كلا. ولا حبي شك. So inshallah we'll tell you some of those stories that we used to hear when we were kids, and of course, like the Somali stories, most of them have animals in them, right? What's durwa? Hyena. So durwa, there are hyenas, there are lions, there are crocodiles, there are jackals. So some of them are short stories. So some of those short stories are very short, but then they always have a wisdom behind them, right? There is always a lesson behind the story, right? So even if it's very short, it always has a lesson. And many times the wisdom in the story becomes a saying in the Somali language. It's a saying. It becomes like a saying that people use as a wisdom. So one short one that I will start with, then I'll give to Ma'alin Saeed. We will switch back and forth, right? Just to give you an example of what I was just talking about, is the story where mataqana yahas. Yeah, yahas maxaa wey? Oh, masha Allah, good. mataqana dawaco. Huh? Dawaco is a jackal. Yeah, it's a jackal. Jackal is kind of like a fox. It's a jackal, right? So the story is about a crocodile, the story of a crocodile and a jackal, right? Marka af Soomaali idinku sheegaa marka hore Sooma. Okay. So sheekada waxa weeye waxaa jiri jiray dawaco iyo yaxaas. waagii hore dawacada carab ma lahaan jirin. yaxaasku wuxuu lahaan jiray carab. dawacadii waxay timid webiga markay timid yaxaas bay aragtay, waxay ku tiri saaxiibow waxbaan kaa codsanayaa maanta. haye maxaa iga codsanaysaa? waxay ku tiri walaashay baa caawa la aroosayaa, waxaan rabaa carabkaaga inay amaahisid oo arooska walaashay aan ka soo mashxarado caawa baan rabaa. yaxaaska wuxuu ku yiri aniga carabkayga see kuugu aaminayaa? waxay tiri aniga waa yarahay, haddaa i heshid waa iga adag tahay, waa iga xoog badan tahay, carabkaaga aniga kaama qaadan karo. aamin. waa yahay buu yiri. carabkii buu siiyey, wuxuu ku yiri orod ku soo mashxarad, laakiin berri subaxdii ii keen carabkayga. waa yahay bay tiri. dawacadii waa tagtay, markay webigii ka fogaatay oo buurta fuushay bay carabkii ku hadashay, way ku mashxaraday. waxay ku tiri carabkan dib dambe u heli maysid bay ku tiri. aroosna ma jiray tiri, mar dambana u arki maysid. yaxaaskii wuxuu yidhi adigana webi saabiya uga cabbi lahayd baa lagaa rabaa buu yidhi adoo webi biyo ka cabaya markaan ku qabto waa ku dilayaa ayadana waxay tiri webi dambe maba tegayaba webi dambe haddaan tago iqabo sidii bay uga fakatay maalintaas intii ka dambaysay yaxaasna carab ma leh dawacana webiga ma tegi karto way cabsanaysaa. So the story, to say it in English, is once upon a time there was a crocodile and a jackal, and they were friends. They used to play and they were friends. So one day, at that time, crocodiles had tongues and jackals had no tongues. Does any one of you know that crocodiles have no tongues today? Okay, how many of you know? No, they say it if you really know. Like, don't just raise your hands. If you don't know, don't raise your hands. Okay, how many of you know that crocodiles have no tongues, including the adults? The adults. Abdi Razak, did you know that crocodiles had no tongues? No. They don't have tongues. And this is true, right? So, but jackals have tongues. But in the old days, the crocodiles had tongues and jackals had no tongues. So the jackal came to the crocodile and said, Jackal, the crocodile, you are my best friend. And I have a special event tonight because my sister is getting married. So I want you to loan me your tongue so I can go to the wedding of my sister so I can ululate, right? Do you know what ululate is? In English, do you know? Like in English, the English word ululate. U-L-U-L-A-T-E, ululate. It's pronounced like ululate. Ululate means when you go, right? Of Somali, waxaa lagu dhahaa mashxarad. So so now the jackal told the crocodile, I promise in the morning I'll bring back the tongue. And the crocodile said, how am I going to trust you with my own tongue? And she said, I'm a poor jackal. I'm small. You are big. So you can always catch me if I cheat. So I promise I'll bring it back. He said, okay, I trust you. Go. So he loaned his tongue to the jackal. And the jackal left, went up the hill of the river. And when the jackal made it to the hill of the river, the jackal said, it ululated and said, Mr. Crocodile, you're not getting your tongue back, ever. And Crocodile was so angry. And he said, you will never drink the water of a river, ever. And the jackal said, I don't care. I have a tongue. I'm happy. I'm not coming. So from that day up to now, crocodiles have no tongues. Jackals have tongues. And jackals cannot go to the river to drink, right? So the story, the purpose of the story, like one of the lessons you learn from the story, if someone gives you a promise that doesn't sound right, you have to think twice, right? If you're giving up something, you have to think twice. Like, don't just accept everything, right? So don't become gullible, right? Don't become gullible. People lie to you and tell you things and you say, I promise you're going to gain this and that. Give me this. And they cheat, right? So you have to think twice before you give up something that's very important. So the purpose of this is actually, it's just a story. It has some things that are true. Of course, the speaking animals, those things are not real. But some things that are true is like the crocodiles have no tongues. It's true. When I first heard that story, that was another lesson. Before I heard that story, I didn't know that crocodiles had no tongues. So then I start asking adults, okay, is it true that crocodiles have no tongues? And it turned out it was true, like crocodiles have no tongues. So now, inshallah, I'll have Ma'alin Saeed Salah. And before that, actually, you guys don't know, as some of you maybe do. Any one of you see me before? The kids. Where? Huh? Rauda. Yeah. So my name is Abdi Suleyman, and so we are very happy actually to come here to try to share stories and the things we know with our own children. Like, you guys are our own children, right? And Ma'alin Saeed and I both have children who are not children anymore, right? They're grown-ups. But even if they are old, my mother is alive. Now she thinks I'm a child, right? My child, right? So, and we raised kids in America, so we know how challenging it is. And we also know that many Somali parents, very sadly, do not share the stories they learned when they were children with their own kids, which is also very sad. So we try to encourage the parents, and some of them listen, to talk to their children and share stories with them. And part of the stories my children like the most is when I tell them my own life growing up in Somalia, because our children do not know that. So one of the best stories they enjoy the most, now they're not little kids, the youngest is 20, right? But they were all born in the US. Like some of you might not know, like there were Somalis in this country for a long time, right? Like many of you here, the Somalis came only as refugees, right? But it's not true. Like I personally met Somalis who came to this country in 1914. And Somalis who came in the 20s and 30s. And the ones who came in 1914 told me that there were others here who came in 1890, right? I myself came to this country in 1982. Right? So that's like 37 years ago, right? So I first came to New York City when things were normal in Somalia. There were no civil war, and things were very calm. Actually, Mogadishu was safer than any city in America at the time, right? When I went to apply for a visa in the US Embassy in Mogadishu in 1982, it used to be in the downtown of Mogadishu, the busiest street of Mogadishu, in Shangani, Mogadishu, right? And there were no guards, no police, nothing. Like imagine that. And then and the whole of Somalia was like that, peaceful. And I came to New York City in 1982. This is when the crack epidemic was beginning. And the crime rates were so high. I never thought that I would see a gun, right? I was here like 2 months or something. I went to a pizza restaurant that belonged to a Somali guy. The guy who used to make pizza actually now lives here in Minnesota. So we went to get some pizza from his store, and the store was robbed, and all of us had to lay down. Everybody down, and we all went down to the ground, right, with a gun, right, in New York City. And that's when the crime was so high in America that tens of thousands of people used to be killed in the 80s and the early 90s, right? So to us, like Somalia was very peaceful, but here was not peaceful. So things change in countries like it. So like don't think that Somalia was always, if you hear bad stories and things like that about Somalia, it wasn't always like that. And many of us grew up in Somalia and left it very safe, even though it's not safe anymore, right? And hopefully it will become safe again. And it's already beginning to become safe. So if you hear all these negative stories about Somalia, there are also some positive stories about it. And sometimes, inshallah, tonight we will be here for a while, so we'll switch back and forth. So I'll tell you a little bit more stories about even our own life, like when we're growing up in Somalia, so you guys know how things looked like in Somalia. And Ma'alin Saeed, like when he's here, I can't tell the stories he tells because he's the best storyteller. And he doesn't like to talk about himself. But when we were young, and he was young too, he was one of the most famous playwrights in Somalia, right? So he created some of the best plays that we used to watch when we were growing up. And he wrote many of the songs that we used to listen to when we were growing up. Like any of you ever heard the song Alif Lakordabe? Yeah, he's the one who wrote that song. He doesn't like when I say those things, but I will say it. So now I'll give it to him.
I want to thank both Dr. Abdi Suleyman and Dr. Saeed Salah for sharing with us these beautiful stories.